You know that meme about your inner child? That playful, sometimes wounded part of you that supposedly dictates your adult reactions? Or how about when you casually joke about a Freudian slip after saying something you didn't mean to, but maybe, just maybe, you secretly did? These phrases are so deeply embedded in our culture they're practically cliches. We use them to navigate the strange, often contradictory landscape of our own minds. But have you ever stopped to think about where they came from? What if I told you that these concepts, and countless others that shape how you think about yourself, wouldn't exist without the work of one single, incredibly controversial man? In fact, your entire understanding of your own mind would be completely different. The very idea that there are hidden depths to your personality, unseen currents moving beneath the surface of your daily thoughts, is a relatively modern invention. Before this seismic shift, the mind was often seen as a much simpler machine. What you saw was what you got. There was no subconscious to blame for your strange dreams, no ego to manage, and no inner child to heal. The rich, complex, and sometimes messy inner world we now take for granted was, for most of history, an uncharted territory. Think about the multi-billion-dollar wellness industry. The explosion of talk therapy, life coaching, and self-help books, all promising to help you discover your true self. It's a market that has grown exponentially, fueled by our collective desire to understand the why behind our feelings and actions. This entire cultural phenomenon, this quest for self-knowledge, rests on a foundation laid by one person's audacious theory, that we are not masters in our own house, that the conscious mind, the part of you listening to my voice right now, is just the tip of the iceberg. His ideas have been debated, debunked, and defended for over a century. They've been accused of being unscientific, misogynistic, and bizarre. Yet, they refuse to disappear. Why? Because they seeped into the very water we swim in. They've shaped the characters in our favorite movies, the strategies used by advertisers to sell us everything from cars to perfume, and the fundamental language we use to speak about our own emotions and relationships. Whether you see him as a genius or a charlatan, his ghost haunts our modern world. His theories built a framework so powerful that even his biggest critics are often forced to define their own ideas in opposition to his. So, who was this man? And how did his radical concepts about a hidden, unconscious mind come to dominate our culture so completely, to the point that we can't imagine our world without them? Prepare to have your understanding of yourself turned upside down. I know what you're thinking. Freud? The guy with the cigar who blamed everything on your mother? Yeah, 85% of his specific theories have been debunked by modern science, but his one big idea changed everything forever. Before Freud, the study of the mind was largely the study of the observable. Psychology was focused on what we could see and measure: actions, reactions, behaviors, the inner world of thoughts, feelings, and motivations. That was considered a black box, a ghost in the machine, the domain of poets and philosophers, not serious science. If you couldn't see it, you couldn't study it. The prevailing idea was that we were rational beings, and our behavior was a direct result of conscious choices and environmental stimuli. It was a simple, clean, but ultimately incomplete picture of what it means to be human. Then Freud proposed his revolutionary, and at the time, scandalous big idea. He suggested that what we see is only a tiny fraction of the story. He was the first to systematically map the unconscious mind. His most famous analogy, the iceberg, perfectly captures this. The small tip, floating above the water, that's our conscious mind. It's everything we are aware of at any given moment. The words I'm saying, the thoughts you're having, the decision you made to watch this video. It's the logical, rational part of us that we identify with. But the real power, the immense hidden 90%, lies submerged beneath the surface. This is the unconscious. It's not just a passive storage unit for old memories. Freud envisioned it as a dynamic, seething cauldron of primal drives, repressed desires, deep-seated fears, and unresolved conflicts. This was the operating system of your brain that nobody knew existed. While your conscious mind is busy with the day-to-day, your unconscious is running countless background processes, influencing everything. It's the hidden architect of your personality, the silent director of your life's script. Ever had a slip of the tongue, a so-called Freudian slip, where you say something you didn't mean to, but it accidentally reveals a hidden truth? That's the unconscious bubbling up. Ever had a bizarre dream that felt intensely meaningful, a symbolic language your waking mind couldn't quite decipher? Freud would say that's your unconscious processing, communicating, and working through things while you sleep. This concept has been updated and refined, of course. Modern cognitive science talks about it in different terms like implicit bias or priming. For example, studies show that flashing a word associated with old age, even too quickly to consciously perceive, can cause people to physically walk more slowly. That's your unconscious OS, your background processing, responding to data you didn't even know you received. It's the gut feeling that tells you to trust someone, or the inexplicable aversion to a certain place. It's the reason you might choose one brand over another without knowing why, or find yourself repeating the same patterns in relationships. Freud's radical insight was that these aren't random glitches. They are features of a hidden system, a system that drives your most important decisions, your deepest fears, and your most powerful desires, all from the shadows. He gave us the language to begin talking about the 90% of ourselves we never even knew was there. Let's get practical. The entire $150 billion therapy industry, from psychodynamic to CBT, all started with Freud's simple idea: talk therapy. Before him, mental health treatment was medieval. See that perfume hinting at sex and power, or that car commercial promising status. That's neuromarketing, a $2.5 billion industry speaking directly to your unconscious mind. Freud's playbook. Movies like Inception or Fight Club, entire plots built on exploring the unconscious. Your favorite complex TV characters, thank Freud for making internal conflict compelling storytelling. Now let's erase Freud. Imagine, therapy is just medication. No talking about your feelings. Memes about daddy issues mean nothing. Advertising is boring product lists. Most importantly, we have no language for our inner struggles. We're emotionally illiterate. Now, let's be absolutely clear. Acknowledging Freud's influence isn't the same as endorsing his entire body of work. To put it bluntly, on many specifics, Sigmund Freud was demonstrably, fundamentally wrong. His theories were often unfalsifiable, rooted in subjective interpretation rather than empirical evidence, and colored by the societal biases of his time. If Freud gave us a hand-drawn, myth-filled map of the human mind, then the last century of scientific progress has handed us a GPS, and the GPS is modern neuroscience. The first major challenge to his psychoanalytic kingdom was behaviorism. Thinkers like B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov looked at Freud's obsession with the unseen, the id, the ego, the unconscious, and declared it unscientific. For them, the mind was an unknowable black box. Why waste time guessing what's inside? They argued that true science should only concern itself with what can be observed and measured. Behavior, stimulus, and response. Action and consequence. In their view, you didn't need to delve into childhood traumas to understand why a person acts a certain way. You just needed to look at their patterns of reinforcement and conditioning. It was a radical, almost brutal simplification, but it forced the field of psychology to become more rigorous and evidence-based. It was the first major correction, a sharp turn away from the murky depths of psychoanalysis and toward the solid ground of the laboratory. Then came the cognitive revolution. This movement didn't dismiss the mind like the behaviorists did. Instead, it proposed a new, powerful metaphor: the mind as a computer. Suddenly, psychologists had a framework to scientifically study internal mental processes. Thinking wasn't a mysterious ether, it was information processing. Memory wasn't just a vague recollection, it was storage and retrieval. Decision-making could be broken down into algorithms and heuristics. This was a game changer. It allowed researchers to investigate concepts like attention, perception, and language with a precision Freud could only dream of. The cognitive approach didn't need to invent elaborate psychosexual stages to explain human development. It could model how learning and memory systems mature over time. It was a direct challenge to Freudian theory, replacing his literary, interpretive style with flowcharts, models, and controlled experiments. And that brings us to today, to the gleaming, high-resolution world of modern neuroscience. With tools like fMRI and EEG, we can literally watch the brain at work. We can see the amygdala light up in response to fear, pinpoint the prefrontal cortex engaging during complex problem-solving, and trace the neural pathways of memory formation. We are mapping the very territory Freud could only speculate about. We found that some of his intuitions had a kernel of truth. Our brains do a massive amount of processing outside of our conscious awareness. But neuroscience provides a biological basis, not a mythological one. It gives us mechanisms, not just metaphors. So yes, the counter-arguments are powerful, and for the most part, they have won the scientific debate. But here is the crucial paradoxical twist. We needed that flawed, infuriatingly poetic map to even begin the journey. Freud's theories were so provocative, so sweeping, and so controversial that they created a gravitational force in psychology. He made claims so bold that generations of scientists dedicated their lives to testing, refuting, and ultimately, replacing them. Behaviorism rose in direct opposition to his lack of observable data. The cognitive revolution sought to map the mind he had tried to describe. Neuroscience is now providing the granular biological proof that his methods never could. He made psychology a true science, not by being right, but by being so profoundly, interestingly, and infuriatingly wrong that he forced everyone else to get their facts straight. He drew the X on the treasure map, and in doing so, inspired the global, century-long expedition to prove it was in the wrong place. So, was Freud a visionary or a fraud? Both. But he gave us the single most important tool, the concept that there's a hidden world inside our minds worth exploring, and that journey changed everything. If this changed how you see your mind, hit that like button and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, visionary or fraud, what should we erase next? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you found value in this video, please consider subscribing for more content like this. Hit the like button if this was helpful, and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Have questions or suggestions for future videos? Drop them in the comments below. See you in the next one.